Hello everyone. As you guys saw by the title, this video is going to be a full debate I had with a Roman Catholic Dyophysite apologist live. The material we discuss here invokes heavy metaphysical topics that most people are unfamiliar with. With that in mind, I don't typically like to post these kinds of videos, but in this debate in specific, I received a lot of feedback from inquirers outside of the Orthodox Church who really enjoyed this discussion because it helped them be convinced of the tenability of the doctrine of Miaphysitism, or the idea that Christ is one incarnate nature and hypostases of the Word. As I said, this was on a TikTok live, so I'll put the raw audio file, but rather than including my opponent's immature profile picture, in order to maintain some appropriateness, I'll just simply include an image of Eunomius of Cyzicus, the heretic, in place of my opponent during the debate, only really because a while ago, he accidentally cited the Cappadocian Fathers refuting Eunomius and misinterpreted it as the Cappadocian Fathers actually affirming Eunomius' position, and he cited this against me. Once again, this is a very complicated discussion. If you don't feel as if you understand what's going on here in these discussions, don't let it downplay your inquiry into orthodoxy. I promise that this discussion isn't as difficult of a topic as some heretics make it out to be. With every simple doctrine, it will be complicated by heretics. Just a fair warning, this discussion got heated for my opponent. Please do not judge him on his insults and inappropriate language coming from him, and bear with the fact that some moments are petty attacks against me and ad hominems. Last thing, I'll attempt to give a short summary of what you guys are going to witness so that it could possibly help you guys track down what's occurring. Basically, what you guys are going to see is that within the first 5 minutes, I got my opponent to affirm that Christ was two individual beings and two hypostases. In realizing this, my opponent attempts to argue that there's another sense of the term hypostases, which would supposedly vindicate him from being anathematized by St. Cyril of Alexandria and the Ecumenical Council of Ephesus. He attempted to do this by appealing to the Miaphysite doctrine of distinguishing Christ into two hypostases, and the mind, quote unquote, before the union, by attempting to show that there's another sense where you can speak of human hypostases before the union. He argued that this would actually make the Oriental Orthodox fall under Nestorianism rather than Roman Catholicism if we were to believe that there is a real referent in reality for this human hypostasis. I rebut this by explaining the position on distinguishing the hypostases and theoria in our position, and explaining how the hypostasis of the flesh has a referent in reality, and this referent is the one nature and hypostasis itself which exhibits human hypostatic properties, rather than locating a referent in reality of a divided countable human hypostasis. I explain how the flesh hypostasis is conceived of in the mind after observing the composite product of the union. I also explain how, in contrast to the soul divine hypostasis of the Word, unlike the flesh hypostases, the soul divine hypostases had a real reference in reality in time, not by the induction of locating the union and then abstracting the human hypostases, but by the very fact that the hypostasis of the Word actually did exist as its own hypostases before the moment of the incarnation 2,000 years ago. No response was given. Instead, you'll see my opponent conflating these two senses and avoiding a response. Therefore, my opponent was stuck with affirming two hypostases in Christ, ultimately reducing the Roman Catholic position to Nestorianism, rightfully so. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Sorry for this quick little introduction. I just want to make sure you guys understand the discussion in some way, because I don't want this channel to resort into a degenerate debate channel. The Lord is greater than these petty disputes. Without further ado, enjoy.
Can I ask a question? You guys mind if I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Would you believe there's two individual beings in Christ?
What do you mean by that? Like they have their own individual properties? Yeah, of course.
So there's two individual beings in Christ. You have no issue with that?
Wait, one sec, Agen. Are you taking existence to mean ipso facto subsistence?
I didn't even say the word existence. That didn't come out of my mouth. I said, are there two individual beings in Christ?
Yeah, and are you equivocating being with existence?
I didn't say the word existence.
Oh, okay, but Agen, when you invoke a term, then it's usually vague unless you clarify what it means, especially in a philosophical discussion.
Okay, is
that like apparent to you?
Is there any sense where you could say there's two individual beings in Christ?
Well, of course, there's a sense. Its words are literally like completely like subjective or whatever like a person means.
Okay,
So again, a very vague statement. Would you like to clarify?
Taking the definition that whatever is predicated of the common and spoken of, could you say there's two of them in Christ?
Whatever's predicated of the common and spoken of, you mean as
Yeah.
there's a primary substance and there's like a secondary substance to be
It's an
predicated of?
individual thing.
Yeah, if there's two, yeah. If you mean by quiddity, then sure, that's what you just stated.
I didn't say quiddity. Just the definition. Whatever is predicated of the common and spoken of. Are there two of those?
Do you know the difference between something when it's explicit and implicit? Agen, do you know the difference between when something's spoken explicitly and implicitly?
Can you answer my question?
Well, no, you're actually not clarifying any of your terms. I already did answer your question. There's two quiddities within Christ.
Are they individual?
Well, what's your question, Agen?
Okay.
Okay, I'll repeat myself for the fifth time now.
One sec.
Yeah, no. Agen. Everyone heard me say this. They're individual quiddities because they're distinguished from the species. Okay, Agen, do you know the hierarchy? Genus, species, proprium, different. Yeah, okay. I already clarified. I said individual quiddity.
Stop panicking. Can you say there are two things that are predicated of the common and spoken of?
Good rhetoric, bro. Nice rhetoric.
Yes or no? Can you say, I'm going to ask again, can you say there are two things that are predicated from the common and spoken of?
All I heard was common and spoken of.
Can you say there are two things that are predicated from the common and spoken of?
Well, if you mean like the secondary substance, then yes. But obviously there's no secondary.
I'm not talking about secondary. I'm saying predicated.
That's what you're saying. You just said, are you saying, one second. No, secondary substance is predicated of a primary. Well, one second. Let me educate you on something. Secondary substances take
what do you mean
educate?
Answer the question.
They're predicated.
Can you say
I already answered your question.
Everyone's predicated from the common and spoken of? Yes or no?
Yes.
I just gave you Cyril's definition of hypostases. How do you feel? You just affirmed two hypostases.
Wait, Agen. Here, let's go through. Wait, Agen. One sec. Don't run. Let's go. Wait, Agen. Don't run. In the third anathema, there's two hypostases prior to the union. Agen, there's two hypostases prior to the union. Okay, let's go through this very simply. There's two hypostases prior to the union. Do you agree that the first hypostasis exists concretely in its individual subsistence?
When he says there's two hypostases prior to the union, it's epistemological, not temporal. So this is why Severus will say he rejects that there's two concretized hypostases which then temporally unite. So when we speak of a convergence
and I
from
accurately
two
represented his
hypostases,
position when I said he was united.
when we speak of a union from two hypostases, it's epistemological. It's not temporal. So you affirm two hypostases. How do you feel?
No, actually, one second, Agen. Two hypostases is invoked in two different sentences when you just said it, and you just proved my point. Does the second hypostasis lack manhood and concreteness?
Again, when it's temporal, there is no human hypostasis.
No. Answer the question. Wait, answer the question. Wait. Agen. Let's repeat it again. I'll hold you to the
temporal. There is no human hypostasis.
Don't run, Habibi. Don't run. Exactly. So it's not concrete, correct? It's not concrete. Therefore, it's not concrete, correct?
There is no human hypostasis, so you can't argue that hypostasis has two meanings.
Okay.
That's fine. You just got busted. What do you mean that's fine?
Well, one second.
There is no human hypostasis temporally prior to the union for me to say it's abstract.
Because
you have two individual hypostases.
Is there two? 1 second, I just got to call. Is there two hypostases prior to the union? Yes or no? That's all I want to hear.
Epistemologically, not temporally. Epistemologically, there's two concrete things. Temporally, we don't even speak of two hypostases.
I understand. Let's go
if you understand, then there's no two senses of
hypostases. Is the first hypostasis individually subsistent and concrete?
There's only one hypostasis prior to the union temporally, two epistemologically.
Agen, third anathema, is there plurality of hypostases or is there one hypostasis?
Before the union, there's two epistemological hypostases. I did answer.
Okay. So when you keep saying Agen, you keep saying epistemologically. Okay, I'm going through this with you. Is the first individually subsistent and concrete? Yes or no?
Both are epistemologically. Both are concrete.
Wait. So
funny.
The second nature, pride.
Epistemologically, prior to the union, there's two concrete things according to the defense of the 12 anathemas. I can give you the quote where he explains how they're both concrete epistemologically prior to the union. I understand your argument. Your argument is that prior to the union, there's going to be two hypostases. You're going to argue there's a sense in which the human one is abstract.
You're cutting out a lot.
We don't believe there's two hypostases prior to the union temporally. We believe there's two hypostases prior to the union epistemologically, and
Agen, I didn't say that temporally. Here, Agen. When something's not concrete, it's not spatial.
I saw your discussion.
No, I'm not. No. Agen, it's implied.
Fanatic Cobb, don't try to take it back.
It's implied when someone says, yeah. And fanatic Coptic's got more of a brain than you because you're a dimwit. Because if you actually knew anything, when you don't talk concretely, you're not taking these objects. You're not taking these objects to be spatial or temporal.
Again, prior to the union.
So let's try this again. Let's try this again. I didn't say that. Once again, it's literally implied when someone says it's not concrete. No, I didn't. It's literally implied for the opposite. It's literally implied for the opposite, Agen. If something is not concrete, then it's not spatial or temporal. What?
I'm going to explain one more time. Prior to the union, when we speak of two hypostases, there's the epistemological sense when we recognize heterogeneity and see what the union took place from.
What's the opposition to concrete, Agen? What's the opposite to concrete?
When I'm explaining to you, listen, especially after you affirm two hypostases.
What's the opposite to concrete, Agen?
What are you giggling for?
What's the opposite to concrete, Agen?
What are you giggling for? This is completely
because you're embarrassing yourself. What's the opposite to concrete?
You're the one who affirmed two hypostases. I don't know why you're giggling. I'm trying to explain to you.
Agen, what's the opposite to concrete?
Why are you asking the questions when I'm the one trying to explain something to you? You're not asking the questions right now.
What's the opposite to concrete? No, all of your questions have been answered, and then you went into the statement, and then all you could say is, well, it's not temporally, it's actually epistemologically.
Yeah. Yes, we're speaking of prior to the union. You don't know what prior means.
Yes. And that's implied. That's implied when someone says it's not concrete, Agen, because concrete objects are spatial and temporal.
Again, even the word prior to the union has subsistence. And when he has subsistence, there's only one temporal hypostasis.
No one disputed that. No one disputed that.
Okay, perfect. So now that your whole argument exploded because Cyril only used hypostases in the concrete, how do you deal with the fact that you affirm two hypostases? What are you going to do now?
1 second. That's why I just proved to you. That's why I just proved to you that it's...
You didn't prove anything. There
Everyone...
aren't two senses of the word hypostasis.
I'll answer you. Sorry?
There aren't two senses of the word hypostasis. That's what I just refuted. Hypostases, in the case of Cyril...
you didn't refute anything because you can't answer the question, nor do you understand that concrete is spatial and temporal, and abstract is that which is not spatial and temporal. Agen,
how do you feel about the part where you affirm two hypostases?
What's the opposite to concrete? What's the opposite to concrete?
What does this
You don't want to
have to do
answer
with
a
my
question. What's the opposite to concrete?
I'm the one asking the questions.
Because,
I asked you first.
All your question is saying, listen, all your question is you're presupposing your one univocal definition of hypostasis and saying, how does it feel that you affirm two hypostases prior to the union? Are you retarded? No, you didn't. And you won't answer. Again, my rebuttal was showing that two differently invoked statements and co-referential, and then you're saying, no, it's temporal and epistemological, and then I respond, and then you just repeat your question. So what are you doing here?
There's a second sense of the word hypostasis in the Ephesian Christological controversies.
Okay. I'll do that very simply. If you'd actually answer any of the questions. Can you answer some of the questions? Is the first hypostasis individually self-subsistent? Is the first hypostasis individually subsistent and concrete?
What do you mean by first? What do you mean by first? What do you mean by prior to the union? Epistemological prior or temporal prior?
Epistemological.
I'm asking about the term prior. Okay, in the case of the epistemological prior, there are two concrete hypostases.
Okay. Do you believe at like this second human like concrete hypostasis? Do you believe that it has like particular qualities? Does this like second human nature? Oh, actually, first of all, it's better to clarify. By epistemologically, do you just mean like in like some sort of abstract sense?
By epistemologically, I mean we're viewing of the two concrete things which entered into a henosis. That's what I mean.
Wait, did you just say it's an object of perception?
I'll give you an example. Whenever we locate any composite with opposing predicates, our mind is informed about the opposing predicates that they could not belong to a homogeneous thing. So because of that, our mind creates for itself epinoia and theoria, so it is technically in the mind, two concrete hypostases, or the understanding that they're concrete, individual, particular. They're not concrete in the sense as if they can be picked out in reality, but our mind conceives them as concrete. So there's a sense in which you can say it's abstract, another sense in which you can say it's concrete.
Okay, you just actually, okay, so now that you clarified that, this is going to be like bad for you, okay? So I'm actually going to be talking in the sense that two hypostases is invoked in the manner of which one is denoted by an object of perception because it's concrete. The other is only denoted by the object of cognition, meaning that it's only existing within the mind thus far. Thus, it's not concrete yet. So you just stated, one second.
Conceiving of two.
Agen, 1 second. Okay. Do you agree that in theoria, to like know these like particular things, you need to have this like perception of the thing first. Like you need to be the onlooker, right?
At the composite thing, you view the composite thing and then understand the two things.
No. I'm saying in concept to distinguish between the universal and the particular has to be existing concretely, and you have to be an onlooker to the particular. This is the distinction between an object of cognition and an object of perception.
Well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the composite hypostases? Or are we talking about the relation between particular and universal? I don't see where your argument's going.
Okay. I'll get to it soon, okay? So we're talking about the humanity that you view, in which then you can make like some sort of like deduction of that humanity, of what it is, how it exists.
That's not what we conceive of en theoria. The reason this is unrelated is because I'm not conceiving of a human universal en theoria. I'm conceiving of two hypostases en theoria.
I know. That's my point, Agen. That's my point. You're not listening. Listen very carefully, okay? Okay, listen. No. You need to listen very carefully because I'm asking questions. I don't know if it's your Wi-Fi, but you keep interrupting me, okay? The point is, right, you're distinguishing between something which exists abstractly as a universal and particularly abstractly, okay? Both of these things exist within the mind. For that to occur for the particular, because these are correlative terms, you need to have an object of perception, meaning the onlooker has to know about the thing for it to be particular.
I just told you I'm conceiving of two particulars, though.
Yeah.
I just told you conceiving of two particulars.
Okay, so that's fine. Can I explain the object of perception?
What do you mean that's fine? Where'd you get the universal from if I'm conceiving of two particulars?
Oh, I see what he's going to say. Wait, you believe that you can have particulars without a universal, correct?
Homogeneous particulars need universals.
Okay, so they're correlative terms, correct?
What do you mean correlative term? They imply each other? Yeah, you need a particular to have a universal.
Perfect. So now my question is to you then, how do you distinguish or how do you conceive of this particular from the universal? Let's say you have your species and your individuals. How do you distinguish and show that the species is not the individual by the particular properties, right?
So Wayne, in summary, with where the convo is going, I got you to affirm two hypostases. You're arguing hypostasis can have another sense where it's used abstractly. Can you prove this?
Yeah, I can actually. Hello?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can prove it.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so you said like the hyper. Well, I'm just gonna resume off the prior points before, but you said that like the hypostases, they exist like concretely, quote unquote, epistemologically prior to the union, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is an epistemologically is just basically substituted for in theory, right? So
yes.
Okay, so my question is gonna be, you agree that like for like a universal, it needs every two, like we need like two particulars, right, for a universal to exist, and likewise, Like the
I don't know about one or two, but sure, it's
no, it would have to be
co-referential.
two.
It needs a
It would have to
particular.
be two.
It needs okay, fine. Let's say two. It
No,
would
no,
need a
no.
particular.
Don't say let's say two. It has to be two. Otherwise, how do you distinguish what's individual to
How are you going to distinguish? Okay, let's say two. Go ahead.
Okay. And presumably, like the next question is going to be, how do you distinguish individuals, and also from the universal, like within the mind? I'm curious.
In the case of man, the way we distinguish the universal from the particular is that in the case of the particular,
individuals.
how do you distinguish particulars from particulars?
Well, yeah, so twofold. So universal to particular, and I'm talking concretely, and then particular to particular, yeah.
Okay. In the case of particular to particular.
Question, but anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. In the case of particular to particular, they're going to possess predicates which numerically distinguish one from another that have some sort of commonality. So, and the way particular is distinguished from the common is that the common is going to have some sort of set predicate, which then gets instantiated in a particular mode. So an example would be, I'll give an example where you can see all this come to play. Let's say in the universal, you're going to find the predicate of having hair color. It's very vague and common. It then gets instantiated as black. If in one individual, it gets instantiated as brown in another. So when we see black versus brown, we're going to see that's numerical differentiation between them. And then when we compare black to just a vague property of having hair color, we notice the vague property gets instantiated into the particular, and then the particular with all the other particulars forms a compendium of the universal.
Okay. That wasn't like really what my question was getting. I'm saying, how do you know that they're distinguished?
Because they're numerically distinguished from one another of the same kind.
Wait, how do you know they're numerically distinguished?
Because I can locate it in one and not another.
No, but I'm saying
through some type of induction.
Induction, perfect. And this is based off an objective perception, correct?
It could be through perception, like through your eyes. It could be through your mind.
Your mind, yeah, correct. But it needs to have some like basis in reality, because like we mentioned,
of course.
Just wait one sec. Like we mentioned before, that the manner of which you need to distinguish, or that a universal needs to particulars, is because you can observe two properties in which each would lack, and thus you can see which is commonly predicated of them and which is not. You agree?
Then you're gonna go with what do you see in reality?
No.
In the case of Christ.
One second. Okay. You know that the two particulars are distinguished by way of an objective perception, correct?
Whether it be through mental apprehension or but it needs to have some grounding in reality, which I can account for in my system.
Okay.
I know where this is going.
If you know where it's going, then you'd know the problem, because then it just equates to what you said prior temporarily. And then
I know the solution.
One sec. And then the problem is, or then what the explication is going to be prior to the union, we can say that the divine nature has non-phasal properties concretely, and the other only has phasal properties not concretely, but in the mind.
Wayne, look, you're a smart guy, but according to Athanasius, there's a three-stage step. There's the temporal moment where there is no humanity at all. And then there's the middle moment, the moment of union. This is something that as Miaphysites we have an account for. And Theoria comes in different stages. There's the moment of union, the temporal case prior to union, and then the temporal case after the union. In Ad Jovinian, this is where you'll get your answer, because this is a pretty well-constructed argument, but I've already thought about it before.
Well, Athanasius
in Ad Jovinian,
that hypostasis can be
I'll explain. Yes, I know what he says. Okay. In Ad Jovinian, basically, when he's writing to this emperor, he says, as soon as there is flesh in the Virgin Mary, it is flesh of God the Word. So there's a middle state of the union. It doesn't just go from abstracted universal and then becomes inhypostatized in the subject. St. Severus also cites this to make the same argument. There's a case where there was no humanity. As soon as there's a zygote in the Virgin Mary, that's a concretized particular. And the very temporal moment that it's concretized in the womb of the Virgin Mary, it becomes numerically one. And now that we see opposing particular properties within one nature, our mind examines for itself two particulars. So your argument forgets the middle stage. I know where you're going. It's a well-constructed argument. You went from the temporal moment where it's just a universal hypostasis. All of a sudden there's a union, so therefore the essence must subsist in the particular. Your argument didn't account for the middle position defined by Athanasius. As soon as there is flesh in the Virgin Mary, it is flesh of God the Word. If you want the quote, I can show it to you. You there, Wayne?
Okay, so like you can show me the quote after, but this middle stage is seemingly just something denoting the thing which occurs simultaneously at the conception.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is an argument against your position then as well, not my position.
No.
Yeah, it
not
is.
really.
Yeah, okay, Agen, like actually I don't really want to deviate too much from the topic, but basically this would be like an argument against yours because when something
Why?
well, I'm using the axiom to like basically construct the new arguments, but I don't know if you want to stray off this.
It's not that I want to stray up. Like, I know where your argument is going. It just doesn't work.
Okay, so what's sorry?
The argument doesn't work. I know what you're trying to argue.
Yeah, but it's existing in concrete. You just denoted something that's really temporal. So that's the point, right?
Yes.
Okay. So is the existence simultaneous to the union?
Absolutely. The exact same moment.
Perfect.
As soon as it's instantiated, it enters union.
Perfect. So it's temporal then.
Yeah, as soon as it's instantiated, it enters
So
the
then the
union.
epistemological thing reduces to temporality.
No, because it never had its own enumeration in reality. It never had its own enumeration temporally. The instantiation was temporal, but as soon as it was concretized, it became numerically one.
Agen, I'm not disputing.
So that's why.
Okay. Let me make this clear. That's not my dispute whatsoever. That's not what I'm disputing. I understand that you guys say at the moment of the union, well, actually, it never really gains it, but you could say, quote unquote, that so nature is twofold. It's twofold by way of quantitative being and qualitative being. You say that the quantitative being, in a sense, is like non-existent or abolished or whatever you want to call it, but the qualitative being remains. That's fine. I'm not arguing that. That's not my argument whatsoever. The point is I'm talking about how you can invoke, and we're going to get back to the original topic. The point is to show that these two things, or these two terms, hypostases, can be co-referential because they're plural in the same sentence for different definitions. And you argue that there's an epistemological substitution which refutes this idea, and I'm talking about some temporal thing. Yet I just reduced the epistemological thing to a temporal thing. Thus it was
You didn't, because you lack the middle position. What you're trying to argue is that when you reduce it to temporality, you would have two particulars. But what happened is, I didn't say that you have two particulars temporally. I said as soon as the flesh is instantiated temporally, it's made numerically one.
Agen, I understand it, and I'm
not a moment in period. There's not a moment in period where there is two temporal particular things.
I
There's
didn't
a
say
temporal
that.
instantiation.
Yet I just reduced the epistemological thing to a temporal thing.
There's a temporal instantiation where now two particular things are made one.
Okay, yeah. Agen, I don't even claim, like, I'm not even claiming that. Particularization can exist in quantity and in quality. So it doesn't matter about the quantity, whether it exists as a whole or not. Who cares about that? That's not even what I'm arguing.
Well, but what even is your argument now? Because I just explained how our system is coherent, how we have one subject, how we avoid counting two in any way, and how we still maintain double consubstantiality.
Listen. Okay.
Get to your argument. What's this other sense of hypostases?
Okay.
Vindicate yourself.
Everyone like heard what the argument was, and you're literally talking like at the moment of the union or after the union, like fanatic Coptic Kepton. We're talking about prior to the union, okay? And this is okay.
Prior to the union, there isn't a human nature temporally. Prior to the union, epistemologically, there's two quantitative things.
Okay, it exists in mind. Okay, so we already established after the union, you determine what the particular qualities is. Yet prior to the union, it's phasal, meaning it's non-existent.
Temporally, there's no human nature at all. It doesn't exist at all.
No, okay, but I don't think you're like understanding this. The abstract corresponds to two mapped out positions within reality, okay? Whether it's temporal or not, or three as well.
What abstract? The entheoria before the union?
Yes, because like I said,
it doesn't map out to any temporal things.
No, it has a corresponding reality. It does.
No, it doesn't.
What?
I define my position, not you. There was never two temporal things at all. St. Severus actually says specifically, when we say the union is from two hypostases, we don't mean that two hypostases formed and then united. He says this in Against John the Grammarian. So we never have We never had two mapped out particular things in reality, ever.
Okay, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna make this very clear. I've read some of Severus's work. I can mention his letter to Thomas Silensis about how he says there was no manhood prior to the union. I've never claimed that.
Temporally, yeah.
Yeah, I've never claimed that.
But what you did claim is that we had two particular things in reality temporally.
Well, by the quantitative being, by the qualitative being, yes.
There's not a moment in period where there's two temporal particular things. There's a
say
temporal
that.
instantiation. I just told you we reject that. We don't have two particular things temporally.
No, Agen, you're taking particular to mean a whole. Do you believe that a property of the humanity is individual?
Again, by particular, I'm referring to a particular subject of predication.
Okay.
Something which has predicates.
Okay, that's fine. And like Egyptian Christian mentioned before, there's non-self-subsistent particular things. So
those are mentally apprehended particulars.
They're not. How can they be mentally apprehended? Are you saying that
because they're
they're
created by an active entheoria?
Do you know what qualitative being is, again?
It would be like the summation of all like quiddity, hasadity, particularity, all of that. It would be the quality of a thing.
Well, yes, sort of. So it's more so determined as a characteristic property, or it's differing in numbering quality, but not by the whole. You believe that this occurs through the properties within Christ, correct?
What occurs within the properties within Christ? I didn't get your question
there. The definition I just gave for qualitative being.
Like, do we have two natural qualities? Is that what you're asking? St. Cyril says the distinction is in this and this only. The distinction in natural quality.
Yeah,
that's your question?
That's what qualitative being is.
Okay, so would you at least admit that your critique now applies to Cyril?
No, not at all. What are you talking about?
Because I just cited you Cyril for my answer. And
no,
you said, yeah.
No. Agen, you're not understanding the argument. I throw out quantitative.
I don't see one.
I actually made the argument very clear, and I'm gonna break it down if you'd like. Let me speak for like a minute or so. Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. The argument is very simple. Okay. I brought up the fact that it's invoked in two different senses. You said temporally, not epistemologically. And then you said, oh, I asked you what epistemologically is. And then you said, oh, it's just in theoria. I asked you, how do you determine the difference between an individual, another individual, and the universe? You said, oh.
Through induction.
Okay. Right. No interrupting space. Anyways, yeah, so you said by an object of perception, the perception to the thing. So this really denotes that you observe the things and then you get the theory, or then you get the abstract. And then you can see whether they exist prior to the union as something which is concrete in reality.
What was my answer to the thing that you perceived? Did you remember?
Yes, you said that, oh, it can exist prior to the union as a particular, but not temporally. So not like prior to the union. That's what you said.
Yeah, epistemologically. You know how we get to the fact of two epistemological hypostases? Do you know what we get that induction from? I can give you an example of what exactly is the grounding of reality from which we come to two hypostases. Because in the case of the eunomians, there's two types of epinoia. There's paranoia, which is like what eunomius would do. He's just making figments in his mind. For example, I conceive of a unicorn. That has no grounding in reality. I just made that up. And then there's also things you perceive in the mind that have grounding in reality.
That does actually, Agen.
Okay, a unicorn has a grounding in reality. I'm actually okay, whatever. Let me get to my main argument.
What an object.
The whole point is you can conceive of things in the mind by having a grounding in reality, and you can conceive of things in the mind by just making them up. The grounding in reality for how we come to know of two hypostases is the very fact that there's a precondition which implies it. That is, we notice within one nature two opposing sets of hypostatic properties. And because no homogeneous particular can ever... One sec, don't interrupt. Because we know no homogeneous particular can ever bear two sets of opposing properties, our mind knows it's a union of something plural. So it creates a plurality of hypostases in the mind without me having to come through induction by conceiving of two objects temporally. So that's why we don't have two metaphysical objects temporally. That's why your argument fails.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. That didn't answer a single thing of what I was saying whatsoever.
I mean, you can claim that.
And just to clarify, what I meant by the unicorn existing in reality is I don't mean by like the actual like entity. I mean by the
you think of a horse. You think of I get you.
yeah,
I know.
of course.
Whatever.
So that's the objective intention. But anyways, so the point is right. I'm just gonna map this out like really easy. So then it's like better to understand. Okay. So premise one, we understand the en theoria or the distinction in theory by way of like an objective perception.
Yeah, and it's through the composite nature. That's the object of perception that gives us the information of two particulars.
No. I just want a yes or no question. I just want a yes or no.
Well, whenever you make like any syllogism, there could be sneaky premises that aren't listed. So that's why I'm clarifying.
I don't think like the first
it's kind of like for my safety because I can say yes and then you're gonna take that. So
whatever. Anyways, okay. Premise two. The things of which you conceive of have a basis within reality. If and
yes, within the composite nature is heterogeneity.
I didn't finish. 1 second. If and only if you are either combining, or actually, wait, no, I won't say that actually. Not combining. I mean, actually, no, I'll just go with it. If and only if these things, you come to know these things in theoria by reality, or you combine these two entities. Yeah, okay.
Only in the reality of the one nature that possesses opposing hypostatic properties.
Perfect. So it has a corresponding reality. Yes?
Yes, the one nature is the corresponding reality of the two hypostases in the mind.
Dude, I'm not talking. I think you're like.
I'm just clarifying. I know what you're asking.
I'm not even talking about the distinction between nature. Like, yeah, that's not even.
I'm just saying the thing that I get my inductive reasoning to come to know of the two hypostases. It's the one composite nature itself that bears opposing hypostatic properties.
You think quantitative being exists in the mind, and you think qualitative being only exists in reality. That's fine.
Yeah, and the qualitative being in the one nature informs the quantitative being in the mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
It implies it. Okay, good.
That's not my argument. I'm gonna get to
it. I'm just listing that because it's going to be important for your conclusion. Just keep going.
Well, I've like kind of demonstrated that I already know what you've meant by repeating that.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, anyways, 1 sec. Oops. Sorry. Okay, premise three, these properties or the enumerated wholes either exist abstractly or concretely?
They exist in the mind, and the mind conceives them as concrete.
Either as the mind conceives them as concrete.
Yeah, insofar as we conceive particular predicates of it. An example would be like when we call the divine essence concrete, for example. It's not that you conceive it through induction in the material world. It's in some sense picked up by the mind, even though you call it concrete.
Well, I'd actually say that diversity lies within reality as well, but not in the sense. But anyways, that wasn't my point, right? So you don't believe that the numerical wholes, like a numerical whole of the human nature, is perceived in reality, correct?
The numerical whole you mean the hypostases of the human nature?
A numerical whole is just basically that which like exists as the total summation of properties, and
so it's also kind of like the primary substance. I'll just say it has grounding in reality, but it's not enumerated in reality.
How can it have grounding in reality when you say that it doesn't ever exist in reality, quantitative being?
Through the knowledge of two distinct hypostatic sets of properties existing in one nature would inform that.
You said, wait 1 sec. You said that qualitative being only exists, not quantitative. So how?
Yes.
Right. So
because remember when I said the qualitative being informs the quantitative being that you perceive in the mind?
Right. So
I can lead you through that again. Why that? Why
I don't need that led through. Right. So you said
why? I'm just trying to answer.
I didn't say why. What?
Okay. You said like whatever. Let's keep going.
I said it right, but anyways. No. The contention here is that the numerical whole has no corresponding reality, meaning that it doesn't have a quantitative enumeration in reality and only exists by way of abstract. So what you said before is that it exists concretely is not true because it doesn't exist concretely as quantitative being.
You're presupposing that it needs another quantitative referent. I'm saying it's referent.
I didn't say that it needs. I didn't say any of that. I said that does it have a corresponding reality, which you said it does.
The corresponding reality is the one nature. No, the one nature informs you of the two hypostases.
No, it's 1 second. It's enumerated differently or separately in theoria from the divine nature. Yes. Okay. So then it's corresponding.
Wait, what do you mean from the divine nature? What do you mean?
In theoria, it's just distinguished separately.
Yeah, the two natures are distinguished in theoria. Their correspondence in reality is the heterogeneity in the one nature.
This isn't going to get very far if you're like questioning me on like literally every single word that comes out of my mouth.
I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to,
You are. Like, you need to actually engage instead of just questioning every single thing that comes out of my... No, you're not.
On what? You're on like what? Premise 3, premise 4? Keep going.
Premise 3. Well, I can't, because the point of contention here is that there's no like corresponding reality to a numerical whole of humanity or human nature.
But I told you, the corresponding reality that grounds the two hypostases in the mind is the fact that you notice opposing hypostatic properties in one nature.
That's qualitative being. Once again.
The qualitative being informs the quantitative being in the mind. I can demonstrate that.
Agen, like, I don't know why this is like so contentious of a point. It's very simple. Is the quantitative...
I answered your point.
You did.
It has a referent in reality. It's not the referent that you want.
I didn't say... Listen. I didn't say that it didn't have a... I already said, everyone heard me say before, qualitative being has a referent reality from the quantitative being in theoria. But
and other way around. The quantitative being in theoria,
it's vice versa.
Its referent in reality is the qualitative. Yes.
Whatever.
Okay. So it does have referent in reality. That answers your premise.
No. It doesn't answer my point. Everyone heard me say that the quantitative being is preserved in reality. The qualitative being is preserved in reality, but the quantitative doesn't have any corresponding reality.
It does. The corresponding reality is the one nature.
As a whole, is there a whole of a human nature in reality? Enumerated.
Does it have...
Enumerated separately.
Okay. Is there a divided referent in reality? No, there's not a division of reference.
So then it doesn't have a corresponding reality to its quantitative being in reality.
According to it being divided, in its mode of being divided.
Bro, like, it's really not that hard. Yes or no?
I answered. In the mode of its being divided, yes.
In its mode of being divided, yes. Okay, so that's quantitative being.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
You affirmed two quantities of being, right? Two beings?
Yeah. He already affirmed that.
Yeah, he affirmed it as well when he was talking to me, yeah.
No, it's okay, because it's got on clip like what I said afterwards when I said being, and no one ever clarified, but anyways, and I clarified what I meant by it. So anyways.
Beings, okay, that's good.
You believe two beings, bro. Okay, keep going.
Well, do you believe in one hypostasis, like according to earlier fathers, that like, for instance, Saint Jerome, I'm pretty sure, said that you could speak...
Letter 15. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so then why are you making it such a big deal that words can be equivocated on?
Because in Thomas ad Antiochenes, Saint Athanasius says there's a sense in which there's one hypostasis in God, a sense in which there's three. In the sense in which there's three, we affirm there's one of those in Christ. In the sense of the Ephesian development of the term hypostasis, it only has one referent. You affirmed two of those when I gave you the Cyrillian definition. You have two hypostases. Your syllogism failed to account for how you can get away with that.
Wait, listen. Everyone just heard what he said. He said that I'm just going to presuppose my definition of hypostases. Therefore,
I gave you Cyril's definition, and Cyril's the co-presider of Ephesus. Therefore, you're a Nestorian according to Ephesus.
And I'm here trying to prove that it's opposed in a manner of which it's co-referential. And all you're here doing is just questioning every single word that is out of front of
you never proved it.
But we are still going, and you just got off topic.
Keep going. Keep going. Sorry. Keep going. Go ahead.
So quantitative being doesn't have any corresponding reality, correct? No quantitative.
It doesn't have a corresponding divided reality, but it does have a corresponding reality.
Okay, I'll make this like yes or no.
I answered you. It doesn't have a corresponding divided reality. It has a corresponding reality, though.
I'm just gonna say yes or no, so it's very clear for the audience. Okay.
Okay.
Does quantitative being in the mind, when it's enumerated to just yes or no, please, have a corresponding reality of that same thing in reality?
Yes and no in two different senses.
Okay. What's the second sense of which you say yes, or the first?
The first sense is that no in the divided sense, yes in the united sense.
Bro, that's literally like
You can ask for clarification if you think it's vague.
I know what you're saying. Like, that's literally just saying no. That's literally just saying no to my question. All you're saying is
depends on the sense in which it's asked.
no.
That's why I said yes and no.
It's not even like that. Didn't even make sense what you said. What?
Well, I can conceive in which you ask whether it has any referent in reality, to which I'd say yes, and then whether you ask if it has a divided referent in reality, to which I'd say no.
Everyone heard me for the sixth time clarify what I meant by referent in reality, and then
everyone heard me clarify the two different senses, which sufficiently answers your sense.
You went back to qualitative being again.
Well, did I not sufficiently answer your question, giving the condition you gave?
No, but when I asked you the question yes or no, you said yes and no, two different senses, and then you went back.
Was one of those senses not an accurate representation of yours?
It was, and then the other just gave a redundant.
What are you complaining about?
Because the other because the other is just redundant nonsense to literally confuse the audience.
I'm not trying to confuse, I promise.
No, you are confusing the audience because you're literally being contentious upon every single word that's uttered out of my mouth, and you just did it then.
I'm not trying to be some evil guy. Like, I'm genuinely trying to clarify.
No, okay, whatever. Anyways, we're gonna proceed. Premise 5.
Okay, premise 5.
Yeah. Okay. Does species have its own whole?
It doesn't have its own particular whole.
Does it have a whole?
It's a common subject of predication. So if you take whole to mean possessing like the summation of its categorical properties, yeah. If you mean whole in the primary sense,
does it have quantitative being and qualitative being?
It can be if like, for example, you subdivide them into various species. There's a sense in which you say it's quantitatively distinct from others. If you're referring to in and of itself, it's a collection of properties predicated to a common subject of predication.
Actually, you just affirmed yes, because you just said that the differentia is what distinguishes. So that's qualitative being between species, but the species exist numerically distinguished from one another in the genus. So yeah, I'm going to proceed anyways. Okay,
that was a beautiful answer from me. Then why are you sad? Keep going.
I'm not sad. I just explained it for the audience.
Just keep going.
That's what I have to do every single time. But anyways, okay. So, is that premise 5 answered? Premise 6?
Yeah, premise 6.
Okay, premise 6. Prior to the union, is there some sort of corresponding reality of quantitative and qualitative being?
Temporally or epistemically?
It's both. It really doesn't matter. Wait, 1 second.
Well, they get two different answers. Prior to the union, in the sense of any corresponding to reality temporally, the humanity doesn't exist for it to have any referent at all. Epistemically, it does have referent in reality because it's being informed after your conception of the composite object. So the quantitative being present in the one nature informs you of the quantitative being epistemically, but temporally there is no referent in reality because there is no human nature in reality.
So you just found the distinction between hypostases in the mind. That here's the distinction that's going to occur. Prior to the union, you just said that something of which, for instance, like the human nature, which you derive from an objective perception, it has no qualitative being and quantitative being corresponding to reality prior to the union. 1 second.
Epistemically.
Sorry?
Epistemically, it does. You only conceive of the humanity epistemically prior to the union.
Is there a... Yeah, no. This is my point. One lacks a corresponding reality in which the humanity.
It doesn't. It doesn't because there is no human nature.
Does the quality of a human nature exist in reality or just in the abstract prior to the union?
Prior to the union, temporally or epistemically?
Agen. Okay, this is going to be very simple. Okay, you said epistemically. Yeah, it's going to be very simple. You said prior to the union, there's a grounding relation in which epistemically, there's a grounding relation in which one gives an explanatory account of the other. Okay.
But there is no one another in the temporal sense. Why? Because the human nature doesn't even exist for it to have a corresponding in reality.
Perfect. And if the consequence lacks an explanatory power, it cannot be understood and therefore should be disregarded. Correct?
It doesn't exist. It literally doesn't exist. I don't know what you want me to tell you.
I'm not talking about temporally.
It doesn't exist.
I'm not
Temporally,
talking.
it doesn't exist.
I didn't.
Epistemically, it does
Okay,
have.
everyone. Okay, everyone heard me just say this. Okay, I'm not talking
Forget
about.
this whole everyone thing. Just speak to me. Epistemically, it has grounding in reality. Temporally,
Do
it
you know what a
doesn't
grounding
exist for me
relation
to
is?
answer yes.
Do you know what a grounding relation is?
If it has some sort of foundation in the object.
Well, it's just really that something gives an explanatory account of another, like prior. Okay,
That's a foundation. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you said that epistemically, that which
It
exists.
does.
Okay, I'm just gonna like speak without you just interrupting me every 5 seconds.
I'm clarifying. Epistemically, it does have grounding in reality. Temporally, it doesn't exist
Okay, but when
for
I
me to say yes.
Agen, you really need to stop wasting my time because I actually have to go soon. So we can
No,
finish that.
I'm actually speeding up your time. I know where you're going.
You're not speeding up my time, and you definitely don't know where I'm going because you just affirmed something very, very silly. Okay, so
I did.
Yeah, you did absolutely.
So what I've been saying for the past 30 minutes. So you should have called my silliness beforehand.
No.
Go ahead.
No. Unfortunately, I couldn't call it beforehand because we didn't even get to this point because all you did was question everything.
I've been spamming this answer.
No. Now we got to this point because finally I was able to speed this up without you questioning every single thing I say. Okay, you said that epistemically there's a grounding relation in which we account for the thing in theoria, right?
Yeah. So, the en theoria is grounded in reality.
So the grounding relation, for one, is really posterior to the union, correct? The antecedent for the grounding relation, correct?
Yeah.
And one lacks that, correct?
What do you mean one lacks that? There is no human nature for me to say it lacks it.
No, I'm not talking about the human nature. I'm saying one lacks the thing in which you would require something posterior to the union, the antecedent, to define the consequent. For instance, the divine nature or the divine logos has a grounding relation prior to the union, whereas the other doesn't. Therefore, that's the distinction. The explanatory.
Again, temporally, there is no human nature.
Wait,
epistemically, it does have grounding in reality.
You agreed that for an epistemic account, there's something which we have a grounding relation where the antecedent gives explanatory power to entheoria. Here's the distinction. Here's the distinction between the two hypostases then. The antecedent is posterior to the union and gives an epistemic account entheoria, but temporally that is a phasal property, okay? I've distinguished posterior. The next is that the consequent, the other antecedent is prior to the union and also gives an account prior to the union for the very thing itself, for the individual.
Again, the human nature prior to the union, in the epistemic sense, it doesn't mean prior as in
we're talking about the knowledge.
I'm going to answer. One sec. I know what you said. When it comes to the human nature, when we conceive of the heterogeneous properties within the one nature, that informs me of a referential object in my mind. The entheoria is grounded in some reality. You're confusing and mismatching the temporal part and the epistemological part. And when it comes to the temporal part of the divine Godhead, of course, God the Word is going to have some actual numerical reference. But I still answered, the human hypostasis conceived in the mind is grounded in reality through the qualitative being present within the one nature. So it still has grounding in reality. It doesn't lack grounding in reality.
Agen. You agree that epistemology relates to the obtaining of any sort of knowledge within reality, right?
Yes.
Or propositions, truth, blah, 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 correct? Yeah.
Within reality, exactly. That's the most important part.
Perfect. So basically, my point is that obviously there's a grounding relation between these two things, right? And my point is that the thing of which you say is gained within the mind, which is epistemically, has a grounding relation for its explanatory account within reality, which is going
in the one nature. Yeah.
Can I just speak without you?
I'm just clarifying. I'm just answering. Yeah, I'm continuing your point.
Don't need to clarify.
It does have grounding reality within the one nature.
I'll ask you a question when I need you to answer it. Anyways. Yeah, so the distinction between the hypostases then is going to be by the grounding relation, in which we would say that one is prior and existing by the manner of which we understand it has an explanatory account and the other isn't.
In the case of temporal, the human hypostasis never existed temporally before the union. It only exists epistemologically before the union. And the epistemological before the union has its grounding.
Can the abstract exist without the grounding relation, or the antecedent of the grounding relation?
What do you mean the abstract? You mean the human hypostasis I'm conceiving?
Okay, I define the grounding relation. Okay, a grounding relation is where the antecedent gives an.
I know. Okay. I'm saying the human hypostasis. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
The human hypostasis is informed by induction. in the case of induction, what I'm doing is I see the composite object before me, and when I see this composite object, I locate various hypostatic predicates. And because I locate various hypostatic predicates,
I don't need to know that.
Let me answer.
It's
You do need
irrelevant.
to know
It's literally irrelevant.
It's totally irrelevant.
No,
It's totally
completely
irrelevant.
It's completely irrelevant.
Because I'm giving you the formal account for how I know that there's an actual grounding relation between the
You don't
human
get
hypostasis
okay.
and theory and
It's
reality.
so simple. All you have to say
totally
is reality.
irrelevant.
All you have to say is reality because that's what epistemology is.
Explaining. I'm giving you the formal account of how I got it in reality because that's where your question is going.
Listen,
the formal account for how I conceive of the human hypostases is because I conceive of a human hypostatic property in the incarnate world. Is that my problem? I don't do flipping burger apologetics. I answer with actual zeal and love for the fathers.
No, you don't, because everything you said prior necessarily follows. You're just saying stuff. You're just saying something.
I'm going to answer. Whether you have to go or not, I'm going to answer with the zeal of the fathers.
It's a P and a P. Answer this. Does the antecedent require, or does the consequent require the antecedent to exist? Yes or no?
Again, when you apply
yes or no, does the antecedent require the consequent? Does the consequent require the antecedent to exist? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no?
When you say antecedent and consequent, you're implying some sort of temporality. Where I'm showing you antecedent and consequent is flipped backwards through induction.
Is the consequent in the mind or not?
It's flipped when you're applying induction.
Oh my god! Is the consequent in the mind or not?
In induction, you start with the thing in reality, and then
the antecedent is the induction.
The
consequent is the mind. Does the consequent exist without the antecedent?
The consequent needs the antecedent of the induction. Perfect.
So there's your distinction prior to the union. Then one requires, as a phasal property, the antecedent in reality, which the other does have, and
because it's flipped. It's flipped. The antecedent in reality for the divine hypostasis is temporal. The antecedent in reality for the human hypostasis is inductive and then flipped over.
Agen. What's the antecedent and the consequent?
In the case of the temporal case of the word or the epistemological case of the flesh? Answer that.
They're both grounding relations, meaning one gives an explanatory account to the other. Well, one second. One second. We're going to show how idiotic you are because prior you literally admitted.
Stop.
You said that in reality we know what is in the mind. Hence, as an explanatory account of reality to the mind. Hence, the antecedent is going to be that which exists in reality, and the consequent is going to be that which exists in abstract. Hence, the distinction between prior to the union is that one has the antecedent, the other doesn't have the antecedent. The latter doesn't have the antecedent.
They do. Both of them have, but in two different senses.
Okay, so Agen just admitted he's Nestorian. Agen just admitted he's Nestorian.
You're trying to strawman because I gave you two senses. One is through induction, one is through temporality. They have consequent in reality in two different senses. The flesh through induction, the word through temporality. For the flesh, it has inductive knowledge. Through inductive knowledge, you conceive of the one object, and then the consequent is knowing the flesh and theoria. So they both have a consequent in two different senses. It's not two temporal consequents. It's one epistemological consequent and one temporal consequent. That's why it doesn't resolve in Nestorianism.
Agen thinks I'm
does it resolve in Sepi Epinoia? Answer my objection.
Okay. So your objection is nonsensical because the concept still relies on objective. Because, like I mentioned before, that particulars are distinguished from the universal if and only if there's two particulars. These are obtained by an object of. You said that's basically there's two different senses in which it's invoked. The temporal sense, in which is just like the known perception from the onlooker, and then the metaphysical or epistemological sense, which is just basically the concepts existing standalone or existing within the abstract.
You misconstrued my objection. No, that wasn't my two senses. My two senses is that the reference for the words hypostases is that he had temporal self-subsistence before the union. And then the reference for the human hypostases is through an inductive consequent and antecedent. The inductive consequent and antecedent is that there's the antecedent of the one nature as perceived through the eyes of the soul. I come to see this heterogeneous, stop laughing. I come to see this heterogeneous object, and then I'm informed with the antecedent of a human hypostasis epistemologically. And then the temporal antecedent for the union is that the divine hypostasis had temporal subsistence. So that's the two senses. One is through an inductive consequent and antecedent. The other is through a temporal consequent and antecedent.
One second. Okay.
In the inductive sense, you conceive of the incarnate word in reality. You see various hypostatic properties. And after that, you conceive in your mind, based on the object in reality of the one incarnate nature, a human hypostasis based on the presence of human hypostatic properties.
Okay, okay. Can you mute now? I'm just gonna say my last like minute thing, and then that's it. I'm gonna go because I have to go eat dinner now because it's 8 p.m. Perfect, perfect. So Agen said that I was misconstruing his position, and I absolutely didn't, because I repeated before, and we've all got this on clip, that I said that the antecedent is going to be the thing of which you perceive in reality, which he just said. We all got him on recording saying that. And then the consequence of that is going to be the concepts that exist standalone with a corresponding reality, okay? Now, my point is that the distinction between the two in this epistemological sense, in the induction, is that one thereof lacks prior to the union because there's no concrete of the antecedent prior to the union, whereas there is a concrete prior to the union for the latter or for the former hypostasis, which is the divine hypostasis. Now, Agen can't get out of this because we all heard him himself say that it's twofold in the manner of which it has a corresponding reality, which is the antecedent, and the manner of which it has a consequent, which is the abstract. Now, he cannot deny this because the consequent is affirmed by the antecedent, and you cannot deny the antecedent. Now, if you cannot deny the antecedent, then the antecedent serves as that which corresponds in reality. If it is the case that that which corresponds in reality exists prior to the union, then therefore necessarily the case it is that which exists in concept prior to the union. Now, Agen has no justification for why the concrete exists prior to the union, but only posterior to the union, and it would have no concrete existence prior to the union, temporally or epistemologically, in this grounding relation, whereas the other hypostasis does. Hence, Agen himself just reduced epistemological to temporal in a sense, and also he just proved that there's two definitions of hypostasis in which it is used co-referentially in the third anathema, and every single time St. Cyril says it, when one prior to the union has the antecedent, which has a corresponding reality, in which gives an explanatory framework to the consequent, and then the other, which lacks thereof, and we can only conceive of it at the moment of the objective perception, in which its corresponding reality only exists posterior to the union, and then we can show that it's like sort of like phasally existing in the mind. Anyways, I'm gonna go now, so.
Can I go now, or are you just going to leave and run
Agen,
away
go
with
ahead,
it?
Agen. It's Agen's turn.
All right, very easy. The mistake is that you're trying to basically make temporal and epistemological the exact same mental referent. The way that we apply antecedent and consequent in the temporal sense for the divine hypostases is one way, and the way we apply it in the human hypostases is another. There's two senses of the phrase before the union. There's the temporal sense of the phrase before the union, where you believe of something that actually existed in a time period, which in this case would be the word who pre-exists the union. And then there's the epistemological sense of before the union, where your mind conceives of something as a consequent of observing the union itself in reality. You'll find this in St. Basil's Against Eunomius, Book 1, Chapter 20, where he explains that epinoia is first seeing the object itself and then locating various information about it. This is the epistemology we apply to the before the union and after the union statements for the human hypostases. The human hypostasis itself never had its own temporal existence for us to say it has the same referential value as God the Word. It only has an epistemological grounding in reality. When we see the one incarnate nature of the Word, we see that it has various hypostatic predicates. It has various predicates of particularity, aseity, quiddity, essential properties, and hypostatic properties. Hypostatic properties inform us that this must have been some type of union, because no universal can instantiate for itself heterogeneous hypostases. It only instantiates for itself a homogeneous hypostasis. With this in mind, when we locate various hypostatic properties within the one incarnate nature of the Word, it informs us of a human hypostasis picked up in the mind. He is getting picky on the word before the union because he thinks that that statement has temporal baggage. But we conceive of the human hypostases after conceiving of the incarnate Word, and that's what we mean by human hypostasis before the union. So it's still the consequent of the antecedent of the incarnate Word. This is not the same sense we apply to God the Word having a referent in reality. In the case of God the Word, we don't conceive of his referent in reality through conceiving of the union and then conceiving of the object. We conceive of the divine hypostases in reality because we know that the referent itself had temporal subsistence before the union. So the distinguishment between temporal before the union and epistemological before the union is how we avoid counting two hypostases. Hypostases in the Ephesian sense was never co-referential. If you study the development of the term hypostases in the Nicene controversy, hypostases in the Creed of Nicaea picked out the universal. By the time of Pope Damasus and St. Jerome, in his letter 15, he explains how he does not want to speak of three hypostases, i.e. individual substances. Through time, this term developed to the Ephesian sense, where in St. Cyril's Dialogues on the Trinity, he explains that the term hypostases is the common is the thing which is predicated of the common and spoken of. With this in mind, my friend here, Wayne, already said that he believes in two of those with that definition I listed from St. Cyril, and already affirmed two beings in Christ at the very beginning. That's why he stuck with the syllogism, and he's tried to get away out of it, but he failed, which is why he tried to collapse the temporal sense with the epistemological sense. And it's why today he got buried as a Nestorian by the grace of God. You saw him insulting, you saw me citing the fathers and showing zeal. You can leave now.
Yeah, you definitely did that. All right. Good job, Nestorian Mixer. See ya. God bless you.